from the Cornell Linguistics Circle is the Junior Speaker Series Coordinator, and she is helping us with this presentation. Very honored to introduce Julie Hochgesang. She is a professor of linguistics at Gallaudet University. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to take her class when I was a student there. She is a deaf linguist who specializes in phonetics and phonology of sign languages. She works on fieldwork, documentation, and corpora of sign languages. She also works with ethics of working with sign language communities. Professor Hochgesang also works towards making linguistics accessible to communities, but in particular, the ASL communities. She works on sharing multimodal products via social media and other digital repositories. This talk is sponsored by the Department of Linguistics and the Cornell Linguistics Circle with funding from GPSAFC. It's also part of the ASL Linguistics lecture series for the fall of 2023. Her talk is titled Sharing ASL Data Online Fairly with CARE the ASL Way, MoLo and O5S5 projects. And Julie's saying, sorry about that title. We will have an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation, so please use the chat feature to ask questions or type in chat during her lecture. But I would like to, without further ado, turn it over to Dr. Hochgesang. So take it away, Julie. Hi, everyone. I just want to take some time to mention about the software that I'm using for this presentation. It's a software that's called spelled MMHMM. Essentially, I am not sharing my screen because the slides are shown on the screen with me now. I will be sharing my screen at some point later, but if you're having difficulty seeing the slides at this point, I will be spotlighting myself and my interpreter, Emily, and then you can adjust the size of the screen to see the slides better. If you are currently showing a lot of small boxes on your screen, if you go to the upper right corner of your screen, you can click View, and then hold on, let me spotlight Emily first. And then once you click View, click Hide Non-Video Participants. Emily is not spotlighted yet. Let me get her spotlighted. Okay, and now I'm the only one on screen with the slide. And now Emily will be adjusting her screen. And I need 1 second as well. Wonderful. So can everyone see me okay? Again, if you have multiple squares on your screen and you need to get rid of those, please click on the View link at the top and click Hide Non-Video Participants, and then you'll be able to stretch my screen to see the slides better. Great. Also, you can turn on captions if you'd like. The video is being recorded, as you know. And I'm also a little bit self-conscious, I have to admit. My face is very red right now, which is not my tendency. I think I'm having a reaction. I took got a COVID vaccine and a flu shot yesterday. So if you're looking at my face and thinking, why is Julie's face so pink? It's not makeup, it's a reaction to the vaccine, I think. All right, so I'm very honored to be here. I want to say thank you to the Cornell Linguistics Circle for inviting me. I've known Brenda for a very long time, and I'm really happy to see her again. My name is Julie, and my last name is Hochgesang. This is my name sign. I am a professor at Gallaudet University in the Department of Linguistics. My presentation today is being interpreted by two colleagues, Emily Shaw, who's interpreting for me now, and Miako Villanueva, who is not on screen yet. This is a practice of mine to use interpreters with whom I work very closely because it impacts how my message is perceived. I have specifically asked Emily and Miako to be my interpreters because I trust both of them. For a long time, we have worked together, and especially on these two projects. Miako and Emily have been working with me on these projects, so I trust that they're representing me as I would want to be represented in spoken English. So I felt that it was necessary to say that at the beginning. During my talk, you might see very little text and a lot of images and pictures to show ASL signs. That was intentional. I find it odd to see presentations about ASL that are very non-visual, that have a lot of English text. English text is preservable, it's a record, it lasts long, and it's shared widely. The problem is that when we're talking about ASL, specifically sign languages, it feels as if ASL becomes marginalized from that text. So you will notice on the slides that I usually have a title that's in English. And again, I apologize for the incredibly long title. But at the top of the screen, you can see two signs that are depicted there. One on the left says share, I think you can see on the left. And on the right is care. The woman is signing share, and the gentleman is signing care, the gentleman with the glasses who's on the right. So before I get into the content of the talk, today I'll be talking about sharing ASL data online fairly and with care, and I'll explain what those two mean. But I am practicing FAIR, fair, right now, just to let you know. But because my presentation is in this special app called I don't have slide notes at the bottom, and so I really do like having slide notes that I can share with my audience members. So what I did instead was I typed all of my notes onto my personal website that is accessible to you all via this QR code. You can either scan the QR code and have it pop up on your screen, or you can type in the URL that's at the bottom there and get access to the speaker notes with my slides. I also want to let everyone know that I'll be showing a lot of pictures of actual people. I've gotten permission from all of them. Anyone who is pictured on my pictured or filmed in this presentation, they all have given explicit permission for me to share that content. At the end of the presentation, you won't see a list of references. They're all included in this link. Also, I will have notes and acknowledgements, plus some other resources. So I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to get out their phones and scan the QR code. Still red. So today's plan, it's my understanding of about an hour, but I probably would go a little bit shorter than that. I'm going to start with an introduction to lay out a little bit more of details of what I'll be going into. I'll then move to talk about some context, giving you more information about the projects that I'm discussing today. Of course, in this lecture series, I won't have to show you actual linguistic data. And then I will start talking about the data statements, the data that I've been sharing from MoLo and O5S5, the two that are listed here. And I will close my talk with a discussion about data statements and how we're sharing our data more broadly. Just want to take a moment to talk about my positionality as a researcher, because it has shaped and continues to shape who I am, the experiences that I've had, and my various identities. All of these impact the work that I do and what values and practices are important to me. So I am a white, deaf, female. I come from a hearing family. I was raised signing in different ways. I started with C, I went into PSE and went into ASL eventually. I was mainstreamed in a mainstream program that was had me sometimes alone with an interpreter and occasionally with other deaf students as well. But I grew up signing and connected to a signing community my entire life. When I first went to college, I didn't know it was called linguistics yet, but I was always really fascinated with how people use language and their experiences with language, I think had a profound effect on me. I noticed different people asking different questions about language. People would do work and make decisions that seemed very specific and contained and powerful. And that made me really think about how I was doing my own work. If you look here on the post that I have, this picture was my pinned on my Twitter page for a long time. It says, "I'm an actual living scientist. I document sign languages in a way that is accessible for both the research and deaf communities." So as a deaf linguist, I focused my work on documenting signing communities, and that has happened now for over 20 years. I began here, you can see the picture on the left, as a Kenyan Peace Corps volunteer. I worked in a deaf school and worked on a dictionary project as a Peace Corps volunteer. It was an actual project that I was able to participate in, and I witnessed how people documented these signs, and the questions people asked with respect to the signs that they were documenting really had a profound effect on me. When I came back to the States, I decided to pursue an advanced degree in linguistics, and ever since, I became incredibly interested in documenting languages. On the right side, you see me sitting with a young child who happens to be my son. We were involved in the bilingual, bimodal, binational acquisition project, which was focused expressly on hearing children of deaf parents. We worked on that project for several years. We had a lot of data, weekly data, video sessions between children and their parents. And then Field Methods at Gallaudet University is a class where our students learn how to collect, organize, process, and analyze data, sign language data specifically. So I took that class as a student, and I've been teaching it since becoming a faculty. We have focused on sign languages from Iran, Mexico, Japan, and more, including ASL communities as well. In addition to collecting video recordings, we also have to tag these data. I helped come up with or create and maintain the ASL Sign Bank, which is a tool which isn't a documentation project, but it's a tool that people use for documenting language. And this is, I've been a creator and maintainer of that since 2010. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see two projects that I've been involved in: the Philadelphia Signs Project on the left and the Haitian Sign Language Documentation Project on the right. It's just a few examples of the work that I've been doing. And then most recently, which I will get into more detail later, I'm working on the MoLo project. I'll tell you what the full name is later. And the Documenting COVID project, O5S5, that's pictured there at the bottom. So having told you my experience working so far in collecting video data, I've been thinking a lot about how these data are represented. And this involves tagging them. It involves adding information, metadata to the videos, but also what this involves is considering how we share these videos more broadly. And being a deaf person has certainly shaped the way that I do my own work, but I've also looking at other people who have shared their data using open access principles. So I'm turning to that now. Actually, I jumped. This is in the wrong order. Apologies, give me one moment. Missing a slide.
She's adjusting. We need to spotlight the other interpreter who just came on, and there we're set. Okay, I found the slide that was skipped. Let me rearrange this 1 second. And it should show up. There we go. Thank you for your patience. So I really wanted to make sure that I showed this slide at this point, because when we're thinking about sharing data, we want to think about using the principles FAIR and CARE. And I put both of those words into the title of my presentation, because this is really important. So the acronym FAIR is really about sharing open access. So if you're going to post data online in whatever way, whether that's with pay or without pay or open access, anything, you want to think about how you're formatting it to be shared. So you're not just putting it on a tweet somewhere that somebody could then download and change it and change how it's being shared. So you have to think about protecting it by making it fair, findable, A for accessible, I for interoperable, and R for reusable, FAIR. These are the FAIR principles. And it's not really trying to be controlling. It's about making sure that you're putting things up in a way that is able to be used appropriately and not inappropriately. I often share data using a website called Figshare, 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 which is shareable and also citable. So you can cite the Figshare link, and then you know that that image or that data is going to be in the same format that it was originally, and it's cited to that specific location. So those are the FAIR principles, thinking about how will the data be found, how will it be shared, how will you be able to recognize where it's from, all of those things. So that's about the data component. And then we think about the CARE principles, C-A-R-E. And this information is coming from Indigenous groups who recognize that often research is done on their communities without including their communities or without being respectful of their communities. And they want to make sure that the data that's being used is staying with the community. So the principles involved in doing community work and supporting the community that the data is coming from are these collective principles around data governance, how it is that we use the data. So again, it's an acronym, CARE, C-A-R-E. C being collective benefit, that the benefit is coming to the group whose data is being shared. A for authority to control, meaning that the group sharing the data, it's their language, it's their right to control where the data is being shared, how widely it's being shared. Maybe there's an image and you want to put the full name on it, but the community member feels that they would rather have a pseudonym because their name has special significance, or they don't want their name to be tied to that. They don't want to use their real names as part of the figures. So those are the kinds of things that authority to control would lie with the data providers from the community. R is for responsibility, that we want to be responsible with the data and think carefully about where it is that we're using it, how we're showing it, and how it's framed. And then E for ethics, which is really important in terms of how we are taking care of the data that we're sharing. So these two principles have really been guiding factors in the way that I do my work, being fair and sharing with care. Those are fairly broad principles for any discipline, but these, the Austin principles, are specifically for linguistics. So these are the Austin principles for linguistic data citation. And the goal of all of them is to make primary data, the data that we actually observe, the language use, open and citable. This is so important because a lot of linguistics work, as you read textbooks, as you read articles, they'll make statements and generalizations based on interpretation of data, but you may not be able to access the data yourself to be able to see that. And often with language data, it's really hard to record it in a way that's going to go into a journal article or go into a textbook. But with today's technology, it is possible to make sure that the primary data is linked. So linking to your videos, linking to your original sound recordings, so that the primary data, the original data, is open and citable for anyone who is reading your research. As a faculty member, of course, I'm part of academia, and academia values publications and citations. And so it's really important that we have citations. But this actually allows us to have language documentation as something that's recognizable for promotion and tenure within the academic system as well. So making this kind of data accessible is really scholarship and needs to be included in those kinds of considerations. So as we're making these language documentation resources and tools, they become more equivalent to a traditional publication because we're making them open and citable. One more thing related to open access and data statements. This ties into the FAIR and CARE principles, but is very specifically about how we make data statements. Emily Bender and the Natural Language Processing Group have recognized that people are making data open and citable and posting it, but that means sometimes that other people will use that data in different ways. One way to mitigate that is to use these kinds of data statements, saying who the characteristics of the data set, who the information is from. So this is a template, and I'll talk about how we did the data statements for the two projects that I'm highlighting today. So my title was Sharing Data Fairly and with Care, and doing it the ASL way. And so this is part of that ASL way. Still thinking about that phrase, fair and care. I like that, but the ASL way, and I'm not sure how to sign that or say that clearly, what I mean by doing something the ASL way. I'm still kind of workshopping that in my head. So if you have ideas or feedback, I'd be open to those. But it is about the sign language communities and how we work with them. And that the ethics of working with them means that we're doing deaf-led research. These are quotes from other deaf linguists who have noted that most of the documentation and research has been done by hearing researchers. And so the insights of people who have grown up deaf and been language users of the languages that the data is in have not been included in those publications. So the hearing linguists may have the linguistic training, but they haven't grown up with the deaf experience or with the language background. So we want the deaf communities to be the participants in the data, but we also want them to be leading the research. So there are discussions of this in Harris et al. 2009 and Hochgesang and Palfreyman, the article that we wrote from 2022. Thinking about how the team is led, that it is collaborative amongst all of the researchers, and that deaf researchers are in the lead and in equal footing on those teams. Here's some examples of people who are doing that kind of work right now. The Mobile Deaf Project, which is based in the UK, is doing linguistic ethnography and looking at languaging and the field. And it's really about deaf people's languaging, how they use language, how they adapt their language use to various situations. And it's not that each individual has one language or one mode of expressing themselves, but it's that every individual is languaging all the time and using their language in all of those different ways. And then this leads to the concept of showcasing the data itself, which is the same kind of thing that I'm talking about documentation. But this was an example from Moriarty in 2020 from #DeafTravel, showcasing the data itself as part of representing the signing experiences of deaf people. Deaf-led research, how deaf people travel through hearing spaces, how do deaf people navigate those spaces linguistically, physically, all of the above. And so these other deaf researchers who are doing this kind of work are influencing my work as well. The last thing I wanted to talk about in this category of kind of the ASL way of doing research is when we're doing research, I worked with Molly Clemens and Stephanie Patterson, developing a questionnaire about people's online experience of using ASL videos as part of their research. We were doing that as part of our MoLo project, which I will show you shortly. But we wanted to collect this kind of questionnaire responses from other people who were doing the same kinds of work. I'll give you a minute to look at this. Overall, the people who responded to that survey said that mostly how they found ASL videos online was social media, including Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. So that's the blue section, social media. The second biggest was the yellow, which is YouTube and Vimeo, that have some social media aspects, but are really about video specifically. So that was another high, the second highest category. A common statement from participants who filled out this questionnaire was that they wanted to be able to access the content on a platform they were familiar with. And we thought maybe they would choose platforms where they could like the video or comment on the video, but they actually preferred being able to share it or cite it more than being able to comment on it or click a like button, because they felt that there was potential for harm there. And so really gathering this information from other people who are using ASL videos online helped us think about how we are sharing our data as well. And we asked within this questionnaire about the specific projects I'm going to talk about. So we showed the ways that we share our data for the two projects. We have a website that we created. And the other, we use Figshare, which is the platform I mentioned before, which is an online library. We also had videos shared on YouTube, either as direct links or as a playlist. So you see that the answers were divided. People had different preferences, but again, they liked platforms that had familiar structures, that they were familiar with the features of, so that they could use those. They wanted ones that they were familiar with because they didn't have to learn the technology as well to be able to access the video. So again, this gives us context to how we're sharing data, what kind of data sharing setups we want to use, what kind of platforms, etc.
And just pause a moment for Emily to get spotlighted or spotlit. Excellent, thank you. Perfect time to swap. All right, so we'll be turning now to talk about the MoLo project, which stands for Motivated Look at Indicating Verbs in ASL. We refer to this as MoLo. The basic premise of this study is to look at how indicating verbs, including those that such as ask, tell, give, how those are directed in ASL. But it's essentially a corpus-based project that was based off of or inspired by the BSL corpus methodology. We didn't copy it exactly, but we kind of tweaked it a bit. The project started in 2019, and we planned to take, gather data with face-to-face interactions. But as you all know, COVID hit shortly after we were awarded this grant. So we quickly shifted to collecting data over Zoom. Here you can see all of the videos that we have. Participants consented to sharing all the videos that I'm showing here today. The participants consented to display the images to the public, but there are a category of videos that have been closed, that aren't open access. We have 23 total sessions, 2-hour interviews with 2 participants and 2 project members for each of these. I'll show you example of each of the tasks. Again, this is on Zoom, as we are right where we are right now today. There are 4 participants, but 2 per session, 2 actual participants from the ASL communities, and then we had a research assistant who was gathering the interview data, and then a tech person, a support person who wasn't on screen the whole time. The interviewer was occasionally on screen, but sometimes not. During this particular task, the participants were telling each other personal narratives. And so you can see at the bottom, the individual is signing like, "Oh, wow, that's cool," in reaction to the other person having just told a narrative. So in this particular screen, the interviewer is not obviously visible. Then in the second task, similar to task 1, the 2 participants were on screen without the interviewer interacting with them. They just had a free conversation where they could take turns, ad hoc. This is the third task, which was specifically designed to elicit indicating verbs in ASL. For this particular research project, we had a systems prompt where we asked individuals to describe a process something that they had been, like that they had specifically experienced themselves, like getting a driver's license or other processes like how a bill becomes a law. We suspected that these sorts of descriptions might prompt individuals to produce more indicating verbs. So this was the third task of 4. You can see me up there on the top right. I was the interviewer for this particular data collection session. The fourth task that we had was a language attitudes and awareness interview. This was also inspired by the BSL project. I believe we did modify the text of the interview questions to accommodate the American context. This part of the data collection involved asking participants about signing styles in different regions, what gender differences might look like in sign language, etc. So each of those 4 tasks, participants were allowed to indicate whether they were open or closed for each of those tasks. Sorry, Emily, I saw what Emily was just saying. That's not what I said, but I was ignoring. It's okay. Hold on. The opening and the closing of those 4 tasks altogether was 2 hours worth of data. But Emily is also correct. It's also important information, which is a good reason for having a collaborator also be the interpreter, which is to say that we asked participants for each of the tasks whether they permitted their data to be open access or closed. So there are varying levels of access, not just per video, but per task within the video. So that is representing this notion of allowing participants to have some ownership over their data, which ties back to the FAIR and CARE principles. Thank you. All right, I'm going to show you a very short clip from the collection if I can find the actual video and where the screen is located on my desktop at this moment. Let's see here. Okay, I'll be ready to share it shortly. I want to give people a heads up. The FAIR, the A acronym, is not working because this is not accessible. This video is not fully accessible. We're still working on it. I just want to show you the very beginning, and hopefully Emily will be okay with voicing it. It's like about 10 or 15 seconds. This is from the personal narratives. That's right. And we will begin the video now. Can people see the video that's being shared? You can give me a quick chat. He's saying, I have to tell you something. This is so exciting. So I was parked at another trailer park yesterday, and my tire had got punctured by a nail, and I had to go to the tire shop, and it was about 9 minutes north. So I drove up there, I dropped off the tire, etc. Thank you. Just wanted to show you what that video looked like. So motivate to look at indicating verbs. The gentleman was talking about his RV, needing to go to the needing to get its tires changed. What's interesting, he was actually in the RV that he was talking about in the narrative, and as he was telling the story, it got darker and darker because the sun was setting. It was kind of interesting data session. I'm going to shift now to give you some information about the Documenting COVID project, which the full title is Documenting the Experiences of the ASL Communities in the Time of COVID-19. This was collected from or ran from 2019 to 2021, and I'm going to explain the acronym O5S5. very shortly. This project began in a field methods course, which was happened to be scheduled during the pandemic. We decided to make this the subject of our data collection because of needing to heal and process what we had gone through. This was inspired by the Michigan Diaries project, where they were focusing on documenting COVID experiences for people in that region. So our particular project was focusing on ASL communities. We collected different types of data that were all open access, none were private. Some of these videos involve interviews, conversations, single narratives. There are videos with people on Zoom. Also, those are in person with masks on. We have interactions between people who are in person but physically distant. So there's a great variety there. So returning to the FAIR and CARE acronym, the letter A for CARE, the C, I'm sorry, the authority and control.
Authority to control is what the A stands for.
Authority to control. So traditionally in academia, of course, we have a high focus on English, and people still kind of wrestle with this idea of documenting ASL and what that means. When we write, we're presumably writing English, right? But instead, what we've done here is condensed an incredibly long title to this research project and made it into a written representation of an ASL form. So if you look at my hand right now, I'm producing the O hand shape, and then the 5 hand shape, and now the S hand shape, and then the 5 hand shape. It just so happens that that is the sequence of hand shapes that you see in the signs document COVID. I want to show you a brief clip. I think I have time. I'm going to show one of these. You can find, because this is a findable presentation and the data is also findable, you can locate that clip at the bottom yourself later, but I will show you the clip that I'm showing at the top right now. And I lost my screen, so give me one moment while I locate it. Okay, I'm going to be sharing. Here we go. So can we see? Okay. Hopefully others can see as well. That just hopefully gives you a flavor of what we have in our data collection. The image that's showcased on the bottom of this screen, I hope you will take time to watch it later. It's a really interesting story about her experience with masks during COVID. Now, both MoLo and the O5S5 project use specific protocols that we're referring to as the GUDA protocols. GUDA stands for Gallaudet University Documentation of ASL, which is our approach to documenting ASL at Gallaudet. We have a website where we share these data. Our digital organization involves using Google Drive, Google Sites, YouTube, Figshare, OSF. One downside is that we don't have, we have an interim sharing capacity, but we don't have a long-term sustainable place that we can house all of these projects. For now, we're using Figshare and OSF. It's a lot of labor that's required in order to load all the videos and such in all these various places. Another way we represent the data is through annotation, which I'm showing here the icon for the Elan software, which is a video annotation software. And I'm also including a logo for the ASL sign bank and the / conventions. All of these are tools that we use to make our data accessible and shareable. Now that I have a few minutes, 10 minutes left, I'm going to give a little bit more information about, first, of course, why I do the work that I do in the way that I do, the principles that I've incorporated, paying attention to FAIR, CARE, the ASL way. Now I really want to shift focus to the MoLo and documenting COVID projects and how we are now working to share these videos more broadly. Swap interpreters now.
So as I mentioned, we share the projects, what the project is, who's involved, what publications we have, who's been presenting about it at which conference, and all of that. And we share some of the data through the website, and we use Google Sites for this one. If you access the presentation notes for this presentation, you'll be able to find both of these websites. I'll go into the Documenting COVID site right now to give you a look at how that is set up. Making sure you can see that. It seems that you can. So I'm not going to go in depth of explaining all of this. I will let you explore the websites on your own later. But as I think about the FAIR and CARE principles, if you click on the About O5S5 link, then you see all of this explanation of our project, and this ties directly into the CARE principles. We talk about our project values. Sorry, I'm having to look behind my presentation on my screen, so hopefully you all can see me okay as I'm adjusting things on my screen. But we have a full description of our project values. This is how we show our community affiliations. This is how we highlight ASL on the page, making sure that it's visible on every page. The information is accessible in both ASL and English and in various ways. So we have those descriptions. And we also post our videos and annotations, which we post on OSF. So we have those as fully transcribed, the data set on OSF, but we also want them to be accessible to the community so that folks can see them in a familiar way. So we put the videos here on the website. You can see there it says open access and citing. So if I can zoom in here, there we go. We explain about what to use as the citation if you're planning to use any of those videos, why this is important. Explain our metadata and why this is our approach. And I'm not expecting you to take the time to read this right now, but again, just demonstrating how we explain all of these things and how we have that all visible on the website where we post the data as well. This website is not finished. I'm still working on uploading things, but we do have videos from our Documenting COVID project. The video links are there on the website, and so you can click on them and see short narratives. Under each video, we see how to cite that specific video, and we see a link to the Elon file where we have the linguistic transcriptions that we have done and the annotations of the signs themselves. So you can see immediately that we're incorporating FAIR and CARE into how we're presenting this, how we're making sure that it's citable, how we're making sure the links to the actual data and the research annotations are all there for the community to use. The citation, you see, the last name of the person in the citation says done there for this video. That is actually the person signing in the video. So the citation is to the person who provided the content. It's not me as the researcher who is the lead author on this citation. The author is the person who provided the data. So again, this is ownership of the data as part of those CARE principles, that the citations go to the data providers. I'm going to close that website now. There we go. Only have about 5 minutes left, so I'll give a couple more examples and then try to wrap up soon. I mentioned that we use YouTube videos because that's a format that people are familiar with, and as we saw in the questionnaires, they're familiar with that. You see at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little icon. It's yellow. It looks like two little dots. It's actually two little hands with their thumbs together. That's an emoji that we use, which is our symbol for open access. So you'll see that on the videos there, which means that's how we label in the video itself that this one, the participants agreed that it could be open access. I want to take a closer look at a YouTube video, one of the YouTube videos. And again, I don't expect you to be able to read this. I know the text is very small on the screen. I'm really just pointing out things for you to go and look at later. But I wanted to show you the kinds of information we put into the description on YouTube as part of making sure that the information is findable, accessible, all of those kind of things, and in a way that honors our community. As I mentioned, the citation is credited to the signer themselves. So that's the person's last name, who is the lead author as the citation. We also include some information that the data providers give of their identity information, and we include that as the metadata. So it's up to them to decide that. And if they choose that they want that metadata removed, so suppose they put in what their gender was, they put in information about themselves, and they would like to hide that later, they always have the option to contact us and get that changed. We also describe there how we care for the data. And it's really important to mention, I'm talking about ASL, but this applies to any sign language and any spoken language. every language has variety, and every individual uses unique varieties of that language. And so we want to honor and recognize that variation that occurs within the language and within individual uses. And so we are responsible for taking care of the language and presenting it in a way that people can recognize the importance of the fact that we are working with someone's language, someone's life, someone's way of expressing themselves, someone's stories about their life. And all of that is very personal and very precious to individuals as part of how we language in the world. So last, really quickly, I was hoping I'd have a little more time on this, but as I explained, we do data statements. We do them in English, and this probably is the boring part for most people, but for me, I find it interesting. It's a way to explain what is the data, how did we collect it, just a basic description of that, so that people who are looking at these videos know what it is they're looking at and have that contextual information for how that happens. So we do that in English, but we also do that in ASL. So I actually had a participant interview me doing all of this data statement in ASL. So we provide that as well. And I thought it would be short. It would be 30 minutes or so, but it actually ends up being 3 hours of video of doing all of those statements and really giving it. I mean, it's quite in depth, but we want to make sure that's accessible on the website so that people know that the information is there and it is for the community in the language of the community. The reason why I wanted to talk about that is because these kinds of things are new for the ASL community. This is not the way research has been done over the years. And so this is a groundbreaking way of doing it, unfortunately, but we want to be pushing this so that other people are doing it this same kind of way. And what your thoughts are about other ways that we can really make the ways that we share the data fair and that we can share it with care. So as you are doing your own data presentations, you are thinking about these same concepts. I am on the dot at the half hour, so I think my presentation is done at this point. I just want to wrap up by saying these are the kinds of things I think about as we talk about sharing data, and I really want us to be having these wider conversations because it is our language, our lives, really people's personal selves that they are sharing with us, and we want to be careful and conscientious about what we do with that information. So incorporating these principles is really, really important work. And that's a huge value for me. I'm going to keep thinking about this for as many years as I'm doing the work. And I hope that others are thinking about it with me. And I'm open to any conversations about that. As you can see, the QR code is there on the screen again. Oh, I didn't put the bit.ly there with it, but you do have the QR code there, and I can give Brenda the bit.ly if you need that for access for later. Oh my goodness, yes, thank you so much. We're going to switch interpreters again.
I want to thank you, Julie, so much for your wonderful presentation. Yep, give us a moment so we can spotlight everyone that needs to be. There we go. Great. Yes, so now it's Brenda, Julie, and Emily who should be spotlighted. Okay, thank you so much, Julie, for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so thrilled that more people are seeing what you've been working on, and also hopeful that people will be incorporating your approaches that you're showing here in their work. And Julie's saying, yes, it would be great for you to be able to showcase that in your own classes. Absolutely. So now is a great time for questions. I'd like to open the floor to participants or anyone who might have a question. So I'm going to see, Bianca has a question. Yes. Hello. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing work. My question pertains to the role of the university in your work. Can you say more about that? Why is that funny? Yes, here's Julie. Well, it's a complex question. So, right, yeah. any academic institution has aspects that are not always coordinated. Sometimes there's a competition for resources, which makes work difficult. Emily and I, who's interpreting right now, as well as Ryan Lepik, wrote a chapter that's called Wither an ASL Corpus. In that chapter, we talk about how we actually connect back to earlier work, people in North America recognizing this work as academic in the first place. I think that's only happening more recently. The resources and support and recognition is lacking in some places. The reason why is that corpus, I realize some people are signing, they might not know this sign. This is the sign I use for corpus, right there. Okay. Corpus linguistics, the recognition of that work is pretty paltry. So we have mixed support. In other words, I've been at this for about 20 years. Well, let's see, 2005, since 2005. So almost 20 years now, gosh. And it's been challenging to get people first to recognize the need for this type of work, but then also to see the value of sharing data, which is becoming more popular now. But it was difficult, it has been difficult to get the infrastructure needed, because it really, in order to do this work, we need like people and labor and technical infrastructure. My colleagues, my students are amazing and wonderful. I'm teaching courses where we work together on these types of data sets. So they're actually, amazing people creating this like beautiful data that I'm hoping the community can really benefit from. But honestly, it's a mixed bag. And I do understand why it is mixed, because it's a complex situation. But anyway, thank you so much for that question. Okay, we'll open to the next question.
Hi, is it me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, so I thank you so much for your talk. I am a data librarian at Cornell, and I work in the law library, but I've majored in linguistics as an undergrad. And so I am, partly, this is kind of along the same lines as the support from the institution, sort of. But did you work with any librarians or data curators in any of your work, or if not, were there other colleagues or resources that you really found helpful to consult with to develop your expertise about data sharing?
So you get it. Yeah, and again, that's a really great question. I really appreciate the intersections of various fields, the fact that you know linguistics and also are familiar with the library side, the support that's needed. Emily, please add if you want. I think that at Gallaudet, we actively recognize the production of films, the need to support research, with the thought of the immediacy of distributing video data. We're a very small university. We're not like large research institutions. We don't have a lot of staff. Our library is very small. Our tech service department is very small. They're dedicated to providing services to the entire student body, and just speaking specifically about the technology services. So the digital infrastructure is not there. I say this to make that point. It's also not prioritized as much as what distributing videos and producing videos are. So what's, PDF articles and so forth are of course like prioritized in the library, but videos are not. They take a lot of memory. It's difficult to store them, and we just simply do not have existing infrastructure at this point. Gallaudet has been using Google as a mechanism to save large files, but now that is even being restricted. We are finally getting some breakthrough. in terms of getting support from the institution, or at least recognition for the need to have some sort of infrastructure. But the librarians, of course, they don't have the time necessarily in their list of duties to interact with other departments and faculty to do this sort of research, because they're also, it's not in their job description. And so my ability to use their time is also limited. This is changing. Things are changing at this time. Hopefully we can build more relationships, but I have attended conferences and going to maintainers conferences, for example, and reached out to other colleagues who are interested in this type of work. I'm hoping that the open access video projects will kind of get the word out there and slowly push the ball forward. But yeah, it's been kind of off and on. Brenda had a follow on. Yes. Julie just described some challenges that she faced. I'm curious if there are suggestions as well, like as a librarian in the law library, did you have any ideas? I know you just went off the screen, but I'm curious, do you have any suggestions or ideas?
Well, one thing I will say is that in the field of law, the demand for data curation is not huge. I mean, the reason I am, here is that there are some people who do kind of social science oriented work, but right now I'm really just kind of building up awareness among them that I am here and can help them. So I guess the, long story short, I don't have many suggestions that I can share from personal or professional experience.
But you do understand the challenges that we're facing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, my face is very red. Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate it. Let's see who's next in line.
Hi, can you hear me? So the question that I wanted to ask, it's coming from this background, which is that I do spoken language documentation, including a lot that is based around video because I'm interested in multimodality. And I think that most people in that space would be like, it wouldn't be very common to put video on YouTube, even for purposes of sharing in a presentation. I think that people feel uncomfortable maybe with the idea that like another company, like a for-profit company, has access to that data. And so I just wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about your thought process for using specifically YouTube to share the data.
Excellent question. Thank you for that. Initially, I didn't want to use YouTube. I was really against using it. I wanted to use OSF and Figshare expressly. The problem with OSF and Figshare that we've had for loading videos is we have to follow their licensing for access. It's completely open, which I was not comfortable with. And as far as annotation and written transcripts, I was okay with having that be open access regardless. But AI companies right now are starving for sign language data. And the ASL sign bank that I maintain that website, is open access, and people have already taken the videos for those, which we did not realize would be an issue. I completely understand the discomfort with using YouTube, but that is the one place that I can actually control access more so than I can with Figshare and OSF. It was absolutely not my first option or my first preference, but I was reacting also to the community who was telling me, we know YouTube, we use YouTube, and to mitigate the harm of using YouTube, we've elected to use that long text that gives like all of our disclaimers in ways that we want the data to be used. Another issue or benefit is having Creative Commons licensing at the bottom. If I put that there, then it will override YouTube's access. It's not a perfect solution. I completely acknowledge that. There's a slew of issues related to using YouTube, but I've tried my best to mitigate the harm. I will also say that this is a temporary solution until we have something that is more permanent. we are using YouTube for now. But my dream or my hope is that we have it deposited in a repository that can really acknowledge and respect and honor the participants' wishes and desires. But yeah, it's a difficult situation, but that's kind of the best we could do with what we had. Do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, my solution to this has been to deposit my video in a language archive that allows me to exercise the participants through me to exercise total control over that. But even so, like those archives sit on top of other file sharing platforms like Box, and like you don't necessarily know how Box is treating that data. But I imagine that you don't have the option of depositing in a language archive because there have area requirements.
Yeah, yep. It's not an easy. Yeah, not easy. Thank you.
I think we have a question in the Q&A, an anonymous question.
Ah, okay. Let me look. I don't see it in Q&A.
Oh, okay. Let me. Did you find it? Okay, I can paste it in the chat.
You paste it in the chat just for the interpreter. Do you mind? Thanks. Here we are. All right. I have a lot of thoughts about this question, this topic generally. First, I think AI as a whole has taken up a lot of space in our social discourse. Obviously, it's not a replacement for linguistics, but as a tool to support our work, we haven't annotated all of our video data yet. The video data and metadata takes a lot of time, and for our type of language research, it's far more difficult to do linguistic research of ASL than spoken language because we don't have this automatic transcription. My positionality affects where I stand in the types of research that I do in my work. Some people who are involved in these sign language projects within AI companies have no experience being deaf or existing in a signing community. So it's fine. That's one way of looking at these languages, but it's not how I, and especially us in the signing communities, really look at our language. So let's see. I'm just looking at the question again. You're right. The technology is also very 2D, whereas I'm using 3D space. My body is connected to the articulators that I'm using to express my signs. So the mocap is one kind of technology that has sensors that are applied to various parts of the body to create avatars that are three-dimensional. That work is going on now, but it's really intense and long, and they have a lot of data that makes it difficult to process. I don't think we're at the point where we can use AI to do the work that we actually need to push forward this research. Like, it would be great to have machines be able to annotate large quantities of data. We're not there yet. And I'm actually not interested in doing it. I'm avoiding that because of the fact that I really cherish these relationships that we have with signing communities. I don't want to spend and invest my energy and time into developing that technology. I'd much rather use my own skills and energy to promote connections with the community. My only caveat is that I hope that any kind of research that goes forward in this domain involves deaf people and signing deaf people. Another thing, the question about space specifically is hard to capture in a 2D environment. We have also individual signs. For instance, the sign bank is one tool that has a it's intentionally designed to show individual signs outside of context without non-manual markers, so no facial expressions. So I'm going to show you right now a sign, the difference between go, to go frequently, and to go over and over again. Though each of those renditions has a different co-occurring facial expression. But in sign bank, we only have the individual sign go with no facial expression. I have a real grave concern because those videos have been taken by an AI company to be used to represent ASL, and that's not at all what the tool was designed to do. So I have a lot of feelings about that as very problematic, but hopefully all of those comments address the question.
I believe we have another question. Who is it? Oh, Jane. Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciated it. I have a question about research. If you have a person who says they don't want their video to be shared, how do you deal with that when you're aiming for open access? It's a great question. I didn't actually show it in my slides today, but I'm involved with a book, which is the MIT Handbook. I want to make sure the phrasing is correct for the title, the MIT Open Handbook of Linguistics Data Management, which is open access, and it's online, it's free on the website. There are several chapters there related to sign language, and my chapter is involved there as well. And I mentioned that because you're asking about open access. And open access in general means it is intended to be shared about the project, what the project is for, who was involved, what the methodology was. And sometimes you can't share specific parts of the data. For example, children involved in data. I mentioned that my son and I were involved in the Bye project before, which was looking at hearing children with deaf parents and their use of language. So if it's videos of children, you can't post that as open access. So there's certain types of videos that can't be posted as open access. And there's also people's choice. I was going to say, like, ideally, I'd be able to share anything, but I don't think that's true because I really do value individual people's choice, and I care about their ability to decide what gets shared and what doesn't. And so while I value the sharing of as much as is possible and comfortable, I even more value the idea that people have the choice to make sure what is out there of their own language use and have the control over that. So I want to be able to provide open access as much as we can with full recognition that there is a variety of levels of permission that people will give. And there are certain things that can have full open access, and there are other things that won't for a variety of reasons. And it takes work to do that. It would be so much easier to be able to say everything we have on video, we can just post online, but that's not the way it works. We have to get each individual person's permission for each individual piece of the data that they provide. So when I say open access, it doesn't mean free for all, here's everything. It means that we're trying to make things as open as possible, and we're recognizing people's right to choose and control that. Did that answer your question? I hope. I actually have another question, if that's okay. Sure, go right ahead. So when you share a video, how do you protect personal privacy? Because you're showing that person's face, how do you protect their identity? So right, obviously with video data, it is difficult because you can see the person on the screen. So we can't fully protect their identities. One part of how we think about that is as we start the data collection, we do informed consent, which everyone does as part of their research process. You go through IRB, your ethical review board at your institution, to make sure that you have the consent of the participants, and you go through and make sure they understand what the project is about and what they are getting involved in. So we are very explicit that we are collecting video data. Our intention is to put this data on websites so that people are fully informed of what they are signing up for before they even sign up. We talk about the ways that we post it, and people today know about what it means to have their videos be online because of social media and all those things. I think 20 years ago, people didn't really fully understand what that meant, but in today's world, people do. And we will talk about the fact that we want to capture their natural facial expressions. This is not sign bank videos where we wanted the flat faces. We really want to see the full language use. And so that means that has to be there. So we're going to prioritize that because of the type of language research we're doing. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then this is probably not the research project you want to participate in. So there's that first step. And then we also let people have choices. We can change it to a pseudonym. We can remove your name. As I said, we like to cite it with the actual person's name so that they get credit for it. But if they don't want that and they want a pseudonym instead, we can do it that way. If there are people who want to participate but really feel strongly that their video should not be visible, we will sometimes hire a certified deaf interpreter, and we'll have the person's data, and we'll have a deaf interpreter who is doing a copy of what they did in sign language. And so what you actually see on the screen is the deaf interpreter rather than the original person who produced the data. So that's another way that we can do it. But it's a great question, and we have to think about all of those options. The English takes longer than the sign language. Sorry. Brenda's saying, thank you so much. I think we maybe have time for one last question, about 5 minutes left. Julie's saying, I actually have a question, Brenda. I'm curious what people think about the data statement and the description that we put in on the YouTube video. I'm curious what people think. Brenda's saying, I actually do like YouTube because you're right. I can go through and I can find things. I know what the platform looks like. I may stumble across things that are exciting. I do find it disappointing that Gallaudet doesn't have the infrastructure to do a whole video library. That would be really, really nice to have that. If Gallaudet were able to work that out as a digital library, I think that would be ideal. But YouTube is accessible to a wider range of people. And so I really value that piece of it as well. Yeah. Thank you. I'm also curious what people thought about the data statements themselves. Like, is it too long? Do people think they don't want to read through all that? Brenda's saying, I think it's important that we emphasize that of why this data is there. And so I think that's beneficial that people can actually see that. My question would be, is it enough? Will people ignore it and take the videos and use them anyway? And Julie is responding, yes. I think that's a risk of open access in general. You can't necessarily control what everybody's going to do, but at least we've put that on there to say that. Brenda's saying, now I have a question about your data collection. You ask people to share their data, and then you also found things on YouTube and asked people to share those for specifically the documenting COVID project. You included both, correct? Data that was already out there that you asked if you could include? Oh, okay. Let me clarify. The documenting COVID project was a project that we started as part of my field methods class. We had 15 weeks for the class. It was a regular semester, and we were during the time of COVID, but we realized that we really had something cool with this project, and it was going to last beyond the scope of just a semester. So after we had done the original data collection with the class during the semester, We also expanded it out more broadly for people to send in their videos if they wanted to. We set up a booth in the student center at Gallaudet and had people, you know, just provide little narratives if they wanted to in that way. But then we had so many videos that people were sent in. Recently, while I was on sabbatical, I was able to look through a lot of that data and do a lot of the annotating and collecting of that data. And on the internet, we had even more. Our spreadsheet showed that we had over 375 total videos. And again, those aren't necessarily all our videos that we collected in class, but those are the ones that came out of this project that people have continued to share. And like you're saying, Brenda, some of those are videos that are out there, and we reach out to people and ask for those. Oh, and Brenda was mentioning before the NPR story that she was involved in. And again, that's not data that I have access to, but I would love to be able to include it. Brenda unfortunately doesn't own that because it's from NPR, but those kinds of videos and how we share those, I think, is important. Brenda's saying, yeah, it's really inspiring to look at the kind of documentation that you did, especially documenting COVID, like to use that moment to actually have something that was helpful and engaging. Julie's saying, yes, and I love working with Miako and Emily as well on these projects. I mean, it really has been fantastic. I could not do this work alone. It is such team and collaborative work. So thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. I really, really appreciate it. Brenda saying, Julie, we really appreciate you being here to present with us as part of our series. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope everyone has a great weekend coming up. If you can turn on your cameras, Julie's saying, I'd love to see everybody. If anybody wants to wave before you head out, just to say hi. Thank you everyone for being here. Hello, thank you. Thank you so much.